Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another Genre Guys. We have been pushing along for, quite a few episodes these days, I think. I'm not even sure what number we're up to now, but you might have to say that we have been, undefeated in our attempts to bring you quality entertainment. And that is the movie we're going to be talking about today. Wait. Whoops.
Character will be revealed?
Oh, dear. Nope, wrong one. Sorry. That joke never gets old, right, guys? Right?
Yeah, it has.
Anybody? Okay. Now we're doing this one, The Undefeated, a legendary Western starring John Wayne and Rock Hudson. And in this particular instance of the Genre Guys, because of the fact that I had a rather very busy week and I hadn't had a chance to actually watch this film to do this review in time, I am going to be taking the spot of you, wonderful audience member or member of the Pro Channel, and I will be asking Lou and Lorn all of those hard-hitting, tough questions of why should I sit down and devote, I think, 120 minutes of my life to this film?
Because it's good. And because whether you're a fan of cerebral mellowness or Travolta overacting, you'll still like this movie. How's that? The thrill of victory, the agony of defeat, but it's The Undefeated. So
you'd say it's as good as Battlefield Earth then?
At least.
It's on Earth and it involves battlefields. Does that help?
All right.
I
mean, right off the bat, John Wayne, Rock Hudson. I mean, you can't go wrong with that, right? Like, it's
not at all. And also all of the what would you call it? The John Wayne Mafia. I mean,
the regular players. You got Ben Johnson. You got Harry Carey Jr. You got just
Cabot and Johnson. And Bill Clothier, the cinematographer, also did a huge number. And Andrew McLaughlin did, I don't know, 4 or 5 with him. So.
Also a young Jan Michael Vincent.
Yes, that's right. And 2 football stars, Roman Gabriel and Merlin Olsen.
Oh.
So both members of the College Football Hall of Fame.
So here we go. Battling it out.
And Catwoman number 3, Lee Merriweather.
Battling it out toe-to-toe and side-by-side across 2,000 miles of thundering adventure. Wayne plus Hudson equals dynamite. Does the movie live up to that poster, guys? What do you think?
I think it's a movie poster and therefore overdone, but that's okay. 2,000 miles, it's not that far.
Okay.
Well, maybe, I don't know. Let's see. They start, Memphis or Virginia or someplace, and they wind up in Mexico. But
well, here, Lou, why don't you give us the synopsis of the film?
Okay, folks, I feel like singing the theme from F Troop. The end of the Civil War was near. Anyway, this is the very end of the Civil War, and John Wayne is a Union, I forget whether he's a colonel or a major, but and they have a battle with a group of Confederates, and just as they're winding it up and they win and they're about to see to the needs of their enemies, they get word that 3 days before, Grant had Lee surrender at Appomattox and the war is over. Now, historically, technically, that's not really true because the war kind of lingered on for a while. But they encounter the officer of the losing Confederate group, played, for those of you who are Disney fans, by Royal Dano, which may not be a familiar name to you, but when he opens his mouth at the beginning of the movie and tells them they knew that Lee had surrendered, but they hadn't, because the South will rise again, whatever. That's the guy, curiously enough, in a Civil War movie playing a Southerner, who does the voice of Abraham Lincoln at Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln at the parks.
Oh.
Anyway, so what are they going to do? Well, Wayne and his gang are going to muster out of the army and go in the horse business. Specifically, they're going to ride around to all of the horses that have been discarded all over Texas and Oklahoma where they are, and round them up into a massive herd of 3,000 horses and sell them to the Mexicans, because in Mexico, there's still a war going on.
That's not right. Their plan is to sell them to the U.S. Army.
Oh, that's right. Pardon me. They're going to sell them to the U.S. Army, But the U.S. Army, well, as the story goes on, tries to chisel him, and then they decide maybe Mexico is a good thing. And remember that in Mexico at this time, you've got this battle between the Mexicans, the official Mexican government, and the French guys who have taken it over with Napoleon III's buddy Maximilian, and of course Pancho Villa and all the other people involved in that, and Juarez. So meanwhile, we go to a family of ex-Confederate people led by Rock Hudson, who have decided that they don't really want to live as the defeated. They would rather be the undefeated somewhere else. And they have made a deal with the Mexican government to come down there and be their kind of consultants, if you will. And so, because they don't want to sell their property. And anyway, there are two parties involved here, John Wayne and the Union guys, and Rock Hudson and the Confederate guys. And they head south and they encounter each other. And among the other people involved, if you look at that picture, you can see standing up at the back on the left, Merlin Olsen, and sitting on the ground with long hair, Roman Gabriel. Now, Merlin Olsen and Roman Gabriel were major football players. The two of them are both in the College Football Hall of Fame. And Merlin Olsen, you might remember, was in Little House on the Prairie for quite a while. And if you ever lived in Los Angeles, you knew his voice because he also had I think it was a Ford dealer, and he did all his own commercial voiceovers. So he had a big career. Roman Gabriel, not so much, because he kept trying to get back into football and having disputes with management and one thing or another. But anyway, these two parties, both going more or less in the same direction alongside each other, start running into trouble. Mexican banditos that want to rob them, their own conflicts of emotion between the fact that they used to be combatants with each other. They grow, I guess you'd say, a grudging respect for each other. And then they get into this situation where everybody wants the horses and nobody wants to pay them for it, and wind up basically with Rock Hudson's gang being tricked into getting captured and being held for ransom on the grounds that Rock Hudson will go find John Wayne and get him to give the Mexicans the horses, or else they'll kill his family. And we work all that out. I mean, I could go into all the little backs and forths and battles and the parties that they have and the fist fights that they get into. But let's just say all the good guys win in the end. And a great time is had by all in some wonderful scenery with some, you will believe, and I don't know for real, but you will believe there's 3,000 horses in this herd. It's really, really big. Anyway, I'm wandering around because it's a movie that doesn't really have a beginning and an end and a throughput, because there's so many different rival groups conflicting with each other. But it's a lot of fun. And it has, I think the thing it has that defines it compared to a lot of similar movies with them and without them is that the dialogue is so crisp and so witty in places. They get stopped by these banditos, and they ride out John Wayne and Rock Hudson to meet with the bandit leader. And they ask him what he wants, and he says, "I want everything. I want your horses. I want your women. I want your wagons." And so they shoot him. And when they get in, they run back to the camp. And one of the women says, "Well, why did you have to shoot him? I thought you were going to talk to him." And Wayne just says, "Well, the conversation kind of dried up." And there's lots of fun moments like that. And the two of them are awfully good together. And that's The Undefeated, with a fantastic, and I'm always mentioning the score, but gosh, what's his name? Why can't I think of his name now? That's silly of me. Dominic Frontieri, does the music. And it's pretty great too. It's one of those big Western scores, which frankly had kind of gone by the wayside. I mean, this is 1969. This is not the 40s or the 50s, but it harkens back to those great big Westerns of the past. And the score makes you think it's how the West was won almost. It's so big.
It reminded me a bit of the Magnificent Seven.
Yes.
Had some of those notes.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, the eternal villain, the Mexican bad guy. But
well, here's my question, because, like, I've seen a John Wayne movie here and there. Why should I bother? Why should I bother to sit down and watch this film? Aren't all John Wayne movies the same? Come on.
Well, he wins, if that's what you mean. I think there's a lot more. Maybe there's a lot more family in this one, both in the sense of Roman Gabriel being his adopted son, and in the sense of him talking about his marriage and why it didn't work, because one of the ladies in Rock Hudson's party is looking at him and he's looking at her. And also the fact that Hudson and his people are family. And when they leave their home, their plantation, they don't want to leave it to the carpetbaggers that are trying to steal it for nothing. And so they burn their own place down. Literally, that whole thing about Cortez burning his bridges. Because they realize that if they don't sell out for the cheap price that the carpetbagging opportunists are going to offer them, they say, well, if you don't, the tax man will tax you out of it. And they can't find a way to win or lose. And so it's time to go somewhere else, as much as they hate to leave. And this movie has fun fistfights and barbecues and fiestas, I guess you could say, at the end. But anyway.
And so do John Wayne and Rock Hudson sort of first start off as kind of, antagonistic towards each other? Or especially
because Wayne was on the Union side in a battle where Heston's, it's his wife's brother was killed in that battle. So he might very well have shot him for all they know. And anyway, yeah, that's funny. They're trying to put together a song to sing as they're writing, and first they talk about Dixie, but of course the Union guys don't want that. And then they talk about Battle Hymn of the Republic, but of course the Southerners don't want that. So what do they settle on? Yankee Doodle.
I think my take on it would be the reason to watch it is for the historical context, because it does a really good job of framing the end of the Civil War.
Yes.
While you have Mexico basically going through its own war of independence. And so when you have these two veterans from two different sides who get caught up in somebody else's war, that gets kind of interesting because it gives them different perspectives on the war that they just went through.
Yes. And you have to remember also that during the Civil War, many historians have called the Civil War the first mechanized war because, among other things, it was the advent of the Gatling gun and the machine gun, and the next big advance in ground warfare was tanks many years later, of course. So there were for real observers from Germany, from France, from Russia, from all over Europe, Spain, all over Europe, in both the Southern and Northern armies, to kind of learn this whole new way of killing many, 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 many more people in a battle than they ever were possible to be done before the Civil War. So that history is kind of represented in this too, although not directly. But anyway, it's at this point, when, as I said, the whole what I call the John Wayne Mafia, well, like Dub Taylor as the cook, and all of these guys, it's like in that sense, it's a family for the fans, because these guys had played these parts, basically the same kind of guy. Look at Ben Johnson.
Characters.
Yeah, it's like you don't need any exposition to know who they are because they play the same guy they always play. Well, people like certainly, like we said, John Agar, for God's sakes, Bruce Cabot. If you don't know who Bruce Cabot is, taking it totally out of the Western, although he's been in a lot of these Westerns too, he's the guy who's the turncoat aide to Jimmy Dean in the Bond film in Las Vegas. And then, of course, Jan Michael Vincent was nobody then, but in fact, he's billed as Michael Vincent. They left the Jan part off in those days.
Oh.
But Ben Johnson, God, this guy, I don't know if you know much about Ben Johnson. He was a real cowboy, and he got a job to bring some horses to Hollywood, Got there, they said, well, you can ride. We need somebody in this movie. And he basically stuck around because it was a hell of a lot more money than he'd ever made doing anything cowboy. Well, guess what?
I can imagine.
When he finally passed away, he was allegedly worth over $100 million.
Wow.
Because he took all his money and bought real estate in Southern California.
Okay.
Yeah, smart guy is right. And a long way from a cowpoke. And then you mentioned Harry Carey, who was, of course, goes all the way back to the John Ford stock company, so to speak. Jimmy McEachin, the black guy who's one of the two American agents trying to buy the horses, has been in everything and is, I mean, he mostly was in modern stuff. He playing detectives and things. In fact, I think he was in something we did recently. Anyway. And then I mentioned Royal Dano, of course, at the beginning. Yeah. And this thing, various studios and various producers kind of went through, and there was also, and of course, the stunt coordinator was Hal Needham, who became a director and was one of the biggest stunt guys in Hollywood for many years. There's also, in various accounts of Rock Hudson's life, considering what was revealed near the end, his sexuality, there are various stories told about imagining that he and Wayne did not get along because of that, because Wayne was such a famously conservative guy. But they say that actually Wayne, they got together. They said that Wayne supposedly began to sort of direct Hudson, suggesting what he should do on camera. But when Hudson began to do the same with Wayne, when Wayne pointed his finger at Hudson and said, quote, "I like you," the suggestion stopped, and the two men became frequent partners in chess and bridge. It was all shot in Mexico, and mostly. And it didn't make a huge amount of money, but it came out okay. But anyway, it's a movie. It's not about war, and it's not about shootouts. All of that happens. Some great horse riding, some great strategic stuff. What it's about is characters and friendship growing in a way that apparently it did for real between the two of them.
I think it's also about how do you put the anger and bitterness of the past, of the war, behind you, and begin to reconstruct something afterwards, because that's the period that they're in. They're in Reconstruction now.
Yes.
And that's a very, very difficult time. And you can imagine that's what I think the movie does most skillfully is show the perspectives of both sides after this war and how angry they are, because it's senseless. At the very first scene of the movie that you were talking about is when they're having this engagement and the Union soldiers win and a bunch of Confederates are killed. And it shows you one of the things that I think might startle people if you're not familiar with how things worked in battle lines at that time is that your camps aren't far apart. And when the shooting is done, you might pass each other and not be involved in a fight, you know?
Right.
They still had to rig up a flag of truce to approach the camp, and they did, to give them the news that the war is over. And it hurts Wayne's character when he understands that they knew the war was over. He didn't, you know, he thought that he was still prosecuting a war, and now all of these people are dead, and he regrets it. And that's powerful. And I think it goes to, you can understand why both sides would hold animosities, and how you reconstruct a nation after that is not an easy thing. And that's part of what has to happen in this movie is.
And by the way, in the late 60s, when this was made, those feelings were still pretty rampant.
Yep.
Yeah. You know, Northerners thought that all Southerners were a bunch of racist dummies, and the Southerners thought that the Northerners were all arrogant, you know, jerks. And nobody was shooting anybody for that reason, or not many. But I mean, I had an encounter, and I won't go into too much detail, but I think you'll find this kind of amusing. This must have been about, late 90s? And this young man from Georgia I met him because some people I knew were at a horse show in Virginia outside of Washington, D.C. And we were talking, and I just wanted to make conversation. I didn't know him, but, he was a friend of friends. And I just sort of casually said to him something like, this is an interesting part of the country. I've never been here a lot, but a lot of great history. We passed, let's see, I'm trying to think which one it is, right outside of Washington, but one of the major battlefields. And I said, interesting place. And he suddenly, this kid had to be 16, 17 years old, modern kid, but he suddenly his spine stiffened and his eyes got squinty. And he said, I swear to God, well, sir, there's some of us down here not too pleased with the way that little affair turned out. And I sat there just with my mind blown saying, it was 100 years ago and you lost. Get over it, But no, it runs deep. And you're absolutely right, Lorn. This movie is very much about that. Very, very much about that.
So would you say that it was a wham bang all action used certificate?
It's not all action, but I think one of the things that I appreciate about the way that the movie handled some issues that are pretty sensitive is it did portray, like, for instance, right at the beginning when they have these carpetbaggers coming that are trying to buy the property from Rock Hudson's character. He's not going to sell, and as Lou said, they actually burn the property before they leave for Mexico.
Oh, wait, Lorn, let's take a step back. Perhaps there are people who are unfamiliar with the term carpetbagger.
Oh, okay.
Well, yeah, go for it.
No,
well, a carpetbag was literally a fabric satchel, suitcase of the era. But the idea was it was a bunch of Sharpies from up north who figured, well, they lost. We can get a lot of stuff cheap and make some money. So there were various ways that they did it, but one way was real estate. And again, they used the power of the local tax guy, who they probably slipped a bribe to threaten that they would lose everything if they didn't sell it to them cheap.
Yeah, and they were absolutely hated. But one of the things that he brings up when he's talking about how, look, you're going to take 60 cents per acre of this land, and that's the best I'm going to give you, or we're just going to take it. He's making the point that who's going to work your land? It's like you can't possibly remain on here because you've got no one to pick the cotton anymore.
Right, no slaves.
Right, and then later on, when they're making their way to Mexico, part of the way that they come into contact with each other is that they're trying to drive these horses down there to sell to Maximilian's army, and they realize that there's these two trails that are parallel to each other. And John Wayne has this adopted Cherokee boy named Blue Boy that's one of his scouts. And he's gone out scouting, and he's realized that these two trails are parallel. And there's about 60 bandits that are they're moving along with the Confederate camp as they're making their way down, planning to ambush him. So Wayne and Blue Boy basically ride out to the Confederate camp to warn them. He knows they're Confederates. He doesn't announce himself as a Union soldier, but they suss him out at dinner, because they recognize the stripes on their pants, and they realize they were in some of the same engagements with each other. And they have a little bit of a tense moment while they're walking and talking that night, but they settle it with bourbon. They have it on hand, and they have a nice little exchange. And
works for me.
Yeah, and that's the start of trying to build trust between them. It doesn't come easily, and it doesn't come immediately, and there's a few false starts and things, but eventually they get to a place where they respect and trust each other, especially after the engagement with those bandits, which was pretty amazing.
Yeah. And also they recognize Wayne's character's name because that was actually based on a real general named Joseph Orville Shelby, who famously escaped or the Confederate general Shelby, but there was a Union general too. Some of this really happened. This idea of the Confederate general going to Mexico to try and help Maximilian for a fee, it happened. So, like you said, there's a lot of really good, accurate, easily explained. And I'll tell you something: if any of this had been a big enough battle to be, a movie about a particular battle, it wouldn't have worked the way this works, because the history may be unfamiliar in its details, and the atmosphere may be distant, but hey, it's John Wayne and Rock Hudson. We'll ride along and see what happens, you know?
Yeah,
The audience has a way into the history by way of the movie stars and the fact that it's a movie.
And it does explain the conflict between Maximilian and the Waristas really well. It doesn't feel like expository dialogue, and it
Right.
frames the conflict and brings the audience in so you can understand who the different players are. I thought it did that really skillfully.
And it's rollicking good fun. I mean, even when they're fighting among themselves, you know, it's like they have this sort of joint picnic to celebrate 4th of July.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody's trying to be nice to each other and trying not to get into politics and trying not to. But when they finally start, it's like both Wayne and Hudson are going, oh, damn, I knew that would happen sooner or later. Oh, well, let's get into it.
And like
And
a
there's
lot of
also-
times, sometimes you make your best friends after a fist fight.
Right. And also, of course, there are racial issues because Blue Boy, the Indian son, adopted son, and a young girl in the Confederate Party fall in love with each other.
Rock Hudson's daughter.
Yeah. So, you know, it had a lot of issues that were real in 1969 that they made people understand in the context of the post-Civil War period of Reconstruction.
I think you were right, too, to bring up that roundup. That's the greatest roundup I think I've ever seen on film. It's just enormous.
And that bit where they're driving them well, what are we going to do? Here comes the Union Army to try and stop them. And they say, well, if we can get across that river, they can't do anything because that's the border. And boy, that scene where those horses are running to that river and going, God, it's enormous. I don't know how many real horses were there in this scene, but the stunt guys and the wranglers deserve an Oscar. It's that big.
Yeah, there was the point, it's near the last third of the movie when they're having to move the herd past the Waristas who are trying to stop them. And they're going line abreast, trying to stop a herd of 3,000 horses. And I was kind of wondering how they pulled that off because there's people in the middle of that herd that look like they fell down in the middle of it. And it's like, boy,
movie magic.
in that, yeah, I mean, it's utterly convincing. But
well, what I've learned about horses is they are very much herd animals. And if you can get the leaders going, the rest of them will go along. But still, how you do that across, I mean, this has got to be, what do you think, from the front to the back of that herd when they're moving? 3 football fields, 5 football fields? It's just big. And the fact that the movie was made as relatively cheaply as it was, which was about $7 million, and it brought back in a little, just around $8 million. But of course, it's been running around in residuals, if you will, ever since.
So
anyway.
what would you guys say are the okay? So both Rock Hudson and both John Wayne are well-known leading men with strong personalities. How do those two personalities play off of each other? And is there enough of a distinguishing, like, can you distinguish the two of them? Like, as you know, is one very brash?
Sure.
Okay, so how does that, you sell that to me?
Well, first of all, obviously they cast them the right way, not just because, we wouldn't accept John Wayne as a Confederate or whatever, but because of that image of the genteel Southern planter,
who has a real streak of pride in him.
Yeah, and he played that very well.
This was Wayne a little gentler than I'm used to seeing him.
Yeah, I think so too. And it was a man who, how can I put this? This character and the way he plays it he can kind of see a little ahead of where things are going. And it's a guy who's basically, the war, he might have been more idealistic about people, about issues, but the war has made him a realist. And when things go bad, well, they're going to go bad. If things go good, well, they're going to go good. And he's not as defiant or as arrogant or as angry or whatever you want to call it that he would have been without that experience. I think that's important about the way he plays it.
Okay.
And that's why he contrasts with Hudson so much, because Hudson's still hot. You know, he's got his back up and he is utterly stung by the defeat of the Union, and he is not going to back down. Can I give away a gag at the end?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a moment when they're toasting, and this is after the conflict with the horses has all been resolved, and the Mexican general wants to toast to Juarez. And so Wayne proposes that they toast to the United States now that the Civil War is over, and Hudson demurs, and he says, really? You're not going to toast? He says, after everything that we've been through, and he says, very well, to the United States and the Confederacy.
Yeah. It's such a, there are no individual villains. Yeah, the Mexican guy is nasty and plays a trick on him, but he honors his word when they come through with the horses. It's not like, the gunfighter versus the sheriff, like a million Westerns you've seen before. It's not the evil rancher against the innocent townspeople like you've seen a million times before. It's kind of different that way. It's kind of special.
More than anything, I think it's about people deciding who they're going to be, because really the Wayne character, each one of those horses, when they get to Mexico, they've lost about 500 of them. They do a count, and it's 2,505 they have remaining, and they've been promised $35 a head for those horses. That's a lot of money, especially. Yeah. I think they've got maybe a dozen people that are moving these horses down to Mexico.
Yeah.
So take that, split a dozen ways, they'd be pretty well set. And they have this Confederate general who's managed to get his family and friends all captured, and he's basically begging them to give up that fortune that they've just driven these horses thousands of miles just to rescue them.
And they look at each other and they say, well, that's the right thing to do, so we'll do it.
Yep.
We'll figure out something else for our money from here on in. And that's why they're the good guys.
So does it sound like something you think that you would watch?
Oh, yeah, for sure. No. I mean, frankly, you get the film had me, like I said before, at Hudson and Wayne together. That is.
It's a pretty special pairing, and I think they could have phoned it in and it still would have sold. They don't. You know what I mean? Right. They don't at all. It's a film I've always loved and have come back to. You suddenly see it on YouTube and say, and by the way, I guess we can put the link in. It's out there, folks, totally freebies on YouTube, like a lot of things that are coming out of copyright. So,
fantastic.
I really buy the friendship between these two guys. I think they absolutely did come to some kind of an accommodation while filming, I think, because during that barbecue scene, it looked to me like they were having the time of their lives. I think they genuinely enjoyed the experience.
Windage and elevation. Watch the movie, you'll get it.
So, okay, now, were there some things about this film that you guys didn't like, or that sort of, didn't kind of come across in the way that you thought it could have?
Well,
I'll point that direction to you, that question to you, Lou, at first.
I think, other than this general who does the bad thing of forcing him to get the horses or have everybody killed, but the fact that he honors the deal, I would say generally this is not a film that really says very much that's nice about Mexican people. Everybody else, between the banditos and the guys putting on firing squads and all the rest of it. But that's the nature of the story in a way. That's about it for me for a negative.
I think there's two things. I do feel like the movie's a little longer than it needs to be because they redo a couple of the gags a couple of times, while they're feeling each other out, these two different camps. And so I think some time could have been trimmed there. The other thing is a minor niggle because I don't know how you can really get away from this. The movie was made in 1969. It tends to reflect a little bit of 1969 fashion a little bit. It's still a Western, but it sort of looks like a Western that was made in 1969. And so
the sideburns.
Yeah, a little bit of that. Some of the hairstyle choices and some of the wardrobe. But that's typical. Every movie is a product of its time, and there's not a whole lot that you can do about that. So
Well,
I'm
and
just, I'm
since
just,
there were fewer and fewer Westerns being made at that time, certainly for the big screen, and you got a lot of bodies to clothe in this thing, I think to some degree they were a victim of whatever Western costume had in the back.
Yeah.
well,
I don't think there
I'm
was a lot of original stuff done for this.
I'm getting some flashbacks of Marty from Back to the Future 3.
Yeah, he was a little dude period too.
You know what's funny is that a lot of the people in the camp, in the Union camp with Wayne, are guys that are in Back to the Future 3.
Yes.
There's a whole bunch of them that pop up. The only guy that I think was missing from this Western was Andy Devine. Yeah, he wasn't in there.
Yeah. Well, of course, Dub Taylor as the chuck wagon guy.
Yep.
Is pretty wonderful for that kind of humorous cowboy role. I wonder. Here's a question.
What about you, Lorn?
What about me?
Yeah, in terms of your thoughts on this film.
Oh, I first saw this film, I think 25 years ago. I had seen it before. I didn't remember a lot of it. I did enjoy it, primarily just for the way that it handled the historical context of everything. It's not my favorite Western, but it's a good one. And I think that if you're a John Wayne fan, it's definitely worth watching.
Okay, well, that
or a Rock Hudson fan in the sense that at this point in his career, he really wanted this part because he was tired of doing these sappy romances that were somewhat decreasing in revenue. And so this was a different kind of part from what he'd been doing at that time.
Okay, Lauren, I got to ask though, what is your favorite Western then?
I have a few that I kind of hold on the same level. They are in no particular order: Tombstone, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Once Upon a Time in the West.
There you go.
And what's the name of it? Open Range.
Yeah, I think that's a much overlooked movie.
Yep.
And then I would add, that's a great list. I would add Silverado, but Once Upon a Time in the West is not only the best Western ever made, it is one of the best movies ever made.
Oh.
And as far as Westerns are concerned, it is a Western about the West and about the end of the West. Because we always forget, because there's so many movies. Once upon a time, for reasons I won't bore you with, I discovered through research that there have been more Westerns as a genre, since that's the business we're in here, made than any other kind of movie in history.
Not surprising, because they're relatively inexpensive and they tend to bring in more revenue than I think it costs to make them. That's one of the things I've been waiting to see as a revival. And Costner's got a two-parter coming out here this year that I'm kind of excited to see, that I hope is good.
Well, and lots of people say that about where did they go? And my answer is science fiction. Yeah. I mean, the lone stranger rides into town, only it's a planet, encounters the bad guys because there's no empire to be the police force, and gets the girl and rides off into the sunset. If that isn't the plot of half the science fiction movies you've ever seen, I don't know what is. So to me, it's just a change of venue of a classic story of what's happening out on the frontier. I don't think there's ever been much in the way of sci-fi that all takes place in the capital of the empire or the whatever. It's all about stuff out on the fringe, boldly going where no man has gone before,
On a horse.
There is one Western I forgot to add to my list that I want to mention because I think it belongs there, and that's The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, and see, here's a movie that violates the rule there. As you said, this is pretty historically accurate. So the whole thing about if there's a legend or the truth, print the legend. Yep. They put some truth in here too,
Also, I guess now you got me reeling on Westerns. 310 to Yuma, which
the original.
If you like that movie, that's written by Elmore Leonard, and he's also the guy that did Justified, the character of Raylan Givens. First was in a little short story called Fire in the Hole. So if you like that stuff, go look that up.
Yeah. But I don't think the more recent 310 to Yuma was anywhere near as good as the original.
No, because they screwed up the ending.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. Maybe some of the less. Well, if you were willing to include comedic takes, you would certainly have to include both Cat Ballou and Blazing Saddles. But still, well, but folks, someday we'll do it, I'm sure, because it's so amazing. But once upon a time.
Once upon a time. All right. Well, you know what? You guys have twisted my arm. I've hemmed and hawed, and gosh, I think I might just go and give this film a watch.
I think you should. And remember, windage and elevation. You'll know what that means when you see the movie. That's John Wayne is advising the women of the camp about how to shoot a rifle when they're surrounded by the bad guys in that scene right there. And he hands her a rifle and says, remember, windage and elevation, So.
Well, on that note, Lou, do you want to give one of your classic Lou hints as to what's coming up?
I don't remember.
Oh.
I don't know. The last I heard, you have a list of a bunch of things, but you were going to make a schedule for what was next.
Yeah, you know what? That's true. Okay, well, we're going to make it a surprise. It'll
be a fantastic movie that you'll love. I promise.
It'll either be escaping from some type of a city or possibly holding a lethal weapon of some sort.
Oh. Well, what about something from an unlucky floor?
That too. Those floors, you might need a lethal weapon to be on that floor. I'll tell you that.
Or something you might want to watch again if your name is Sam.
Well, that's
I like all of these. All of these sound like good movies.
Yes. And we got John Wayne coming back pretty soon. Here we've done one of his Westerns, not the one you'd think we would do first, but we've got his World War II style coming too.
That's true.
So many movies, so little plenty of time. We'll just keep doing it until you people tell us to go away.
Yeah.
But
on that note, we love your comments. We love your feedback. We'd love to hear from you guys. Please leave your messages down below. If you are watching this as a member of the Pro channel, thank you for being a member. And if you're watching this as part of the T3PO on live access, then consider signing up for the Pro channel because you will be getting early access to all of our Genre Guys films, including the entire archive of them. So on that note, thank you.
I'll just say one more thing.
Oh, okay.
Whichever channel you're watching on, much to great gratification for me, because I sure appreciate being appreciated. But the Hallmark standout, crazily popular show happening on T3PO is the show that Vash and I do about Hollywood. So if you're into movies, you probably want to know how they happen. And that's every Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern, live. The Hollywood, what did they call it? I know it's with Lou and you, but I forget.
The Hollywood Backlot.
The Backlot. That's right. Because the forelot, the backlot, the in-between lot, we got lots of lots for you. And so we'll be there Sundays at 2, unless you hear otherwise.
Well, fantastic. On that note, then, once again, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for leaving your comments or hitting the like button. We love all of that. And we will see you here yet again next time for another, good film that we think you should watch. Or maybe if you've watched, take a trip down memory lane with us. Thank you once again for your attention, for your time. Very grateful for that. And we will see you again next time.
We hope you enjoyed that special presentation of The Genre Guys here on T3PO. Be sure to subscribe to this channel for more content like it. And if you want to enjoy every episode of The Genre Guys as soon as they are released, be sure to become a member at WW Pro's YouTube channel. What were your thoughts on this amazing film? Let us know in the comments below, and thank you so much for watching. T3PO. Please comment, like, and share this video, and don't forget to subscribe to That Park Place Podcasts Online, your source for exclusive content and highlights from WDW Pro, The Pro Show, and That Park Place for all the news that should be fun.